In the heart of a bustling city, where life moved at a relentless pace, there was an officer named Greg. He wore his uniform with pride, and his badge gleamed in the sunlight as he walked through the streets. To many, he seemed like just another cop doing his job, but beneath that polished exterior lay a man whose views were shaped by deeply ingrained prejudices. Greg believed he was protecting society, but his methods often crossed the line into unfairness, especially when it came to people of color. On one particular evening, the air was cool and the streets were quieter than usual. Greg sat in his patrol car sipping coffee while scanning the area for anything suspicious. His eyes landed on a woman walking down the sidewalk. She was young, dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, carrying 2 bags filled with groceries. Her name was Lisa, though Greg didn't know that yet. All he saw was her skin tone and the way she glanced around nervously, or so he thought. Greg frowned. Something about her demeanor made him uneasy. Maybe it was the hood pulled over her head or the fact that she seemed lost in thought. Whatever it was, Greg decided she looked out of place in this neighborhood. Without giving it much thought, he stepped out of his car and approached her. "Excuse me?" he called out sharply, his voice cutting through the quiet night. Lisa turned, startled. She had been thinking about work and errands, not expecting to be stopped by anyone, let alone a police officer. "Is everything okay?" she asked politely, shifting the weight of the grocery bags in her hands. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but Greg wasn't interested in pleasantries. "Do you live around here?" he demanded, his tone clipped and accusatory. Lisa hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, I do. Just a couple of blocks away." Greg narrowed his eyes. "What's your name? Do you have ID?" At first, Lisa felt confused. Why was he asking for identification? She hadn't done anything wrong, but she tried to remain composed. "My ID is in my bag," she explained, nodding toward the grocery sack in her left hand. "Can I set these down for a second?" Instead of accepting her explanation, Greg grew impatient. "Don't try to play games with me," he snapped, stepping closer. His words carried a sharp edge and his body language screamed hostility. Lisa could feel her heart racing. She knew this wasn't right. She hadn't broken any laws, but arguing wouldn't help. Still, she couldn't help but feel humiliated, standing there under his harsh gaze. A few passers-by began to notice the exchange. A man walking his dog slowed down, watching curiously. A teenager on a skateboard paused nearby, pulling out his phone. Someone else whispered to their companion, "What's going on here?" The tension between Greg and Lisa escalated quickly. When Greg raised his voice again, barking orders at Lisa to stay still, the crowd grew larger. People murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One brave soul, a middle-aged woman holding a shopping bag, spoke up. "Sir, is there a reason you're stopping her? She doesn't look like she's doing anything wrong." Greg shot her a glare. "This is police business. Mind your own affairs." But the woman didn't back down. Neither did the others who had gathered. By now, someone had started recording the scene on their phone. The camera captured every detail. Greg's aggressive stance, Lisa's obvious discomfort, and the growing anger in the crowd. The video would later become evidence of something far bigger than anyone realized at that moment. For Lisa, those minutes felt like hours. Each word Greg threw at her stung more than the last. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She stood tall, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Deep inside, however, she felt powerless. Here she was, minding her own business, being treated like a criminal simply because of the color of her skin. It wasn't fair, but what could she do? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Greg relented. "Fine," he muttered, stepping back. "Go ahead and leave, but don't make me catch you loitering around here again." Lisa didn't respond. She picked up her grocery bags and walked away as fast as she could without running. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and her hands trembled slightly. She wanted nothing more than to get home and forget the whole ordeal. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that easy. Something about the way Greg had treated her lingered in her mind, gnawing at her sense of justice. Meanwhile, the person who recorded the incident uploaded the video online. Within hours, it spread like wildfire across social media platforms. People watched in shock as they saw Greg berate Lisa for no apparent reason. Comments poured in from all corners of the internet. Some expressed outrage, calling Greg's behavior racist and unacceptable. Others shared similar stories of being mistreated by law enforcement. The hashtag #JusticeForLisa began trending, drawing attention to the systemic issues plaguing policing in communities of color. Local news stations picked up the story, airing clips of the confrontation alongside interviews with witnesses. One woman, a neighbor who lived nearby, described how uncomfortable Greg's tone and body language had made everyone feel. It was clear he wasn't following protocol, she said. He singled her out for no good reason. As the story gained traction, Lisa found herself thrust into the spotlight. At first, she resisted speaking publicly. The experience had been traumatic enough. Reliving it on camera sounded unbearable. But after talking to friends and family, she realized she had an opportunity to shed light on a much larger issue. If sharing her story could prevent others from enduring the same treatment, then it was worth it. With newfound resolve, Lisa agreed to sit down for an interview. On television, she spoke calmly and eloquently about what happened that night. She described how Greg's actions made her feel small and insignificant, like her humanity didn't matter. Yet, despite the pain, she emphasized the importance of fighting back, not with anger but with education and advocacy. Her words resonated with viewers, sparking conversations about racial bias in policing and the need for reform. Back in the shadows, Greg remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He returned to his patrol car, convinced he had done nothing wrong. In his mind, he was just doing his job, keeping the streets safe. But little did he know, his actions that night would soon come back to haunt him in ways he never imagined. For now, though, life went on as usual. For everyone, except Lisa, whose journey was only beginning. The video of Greg humiliating Lisa quickly became a sensation, spreading across social media like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about it. By morning, the clip had millions of views, and hashtags like #JusticeForLisa and #WhyEnd were trending worldwide. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some praised Lisa for staying calm under such unfair treatment, while others condemned Greg's behavior as blatant racism. The outrage wasn't limited to online platforms. Real-world protests began almost immediately. In neighborhoods across the city, people took to the streets holding signs that read, "Black Lives Matter," and "Stop Police Brutality." Protesters chanted slogans demanding accountability not just for Greg, but for all officers who abused their power. Among them was Marcus, a young college student who lived near where the incident occurred. He had witnessed the entire confrontation and recorded part of it on his phone. Now, standing at the front of a march, he held up his phone like a trophy. "This is what happens when we stay silent," Marcus shouted into a megaphone. "They think they can get away with it because no one speaks up. But we're here today to say enough is enough." His words ignited cheers from the crowd. For Marcus, this wasn't just about Lisa, it was personal. He'd been stopped by police multiple times for no reason other than being black. Each encounter left him feeling angry and powerless. But now, seeing thousands of people united against injustice gave him hope. Meanwhile, Lisa tried to process everything happening around her. At first, she didn't realize how big the story had become. When she woke up the next day, her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers flooded her inbox with messages of support. Some thanked her for speaking out. Others shared their own experiences of discrimination. It was overwhelming but also comforting. For the first time, Lisa realized she wasn't alone. But along with the positivity came negativity. Trolls attacked her online, accusing her of exaggerating the situation or seeking attention. One comment read, "If you didn't want trouble, why were you wearing a hoodie?" Another mocked her for playing the victim. These hateful messages stung, but Lisa refused to let them break her spirit. Instead, she leaned on her loved ones for strength. Her mother reminded her of something important. Honey, haters will always exist. Don't focus on them. Focus on the good you're doing. As the days passed, news outlets reached out to Lisa asking for interviews. Initially hesitant, she eventually agreed to speak publicly. Sitting in front of cameras for the first time felt surreal. She wore simple clothes, a plain blouse and jeans, but her presence commanded attention. With poise and grace, she recounted the events of that night, describing how Greg's actions made her feel dehumanized. "I wasn't just embarrassed," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "I was scared. Scared that if I said the wrong thing, things could escalate. Scared that my life might be in danger simply because of the color of my skin." Her honesty struck a chord with viewers. Many teared up watching her interview, moved by her vulnerability and courage. Greg, on the other hand, remained oblivious to the growing storm, at least at first. He continued his routine as usual, patrolling the streets and writing reports. But whispers followed him wherever he went. Fellow officers avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice the tension building around him. Even his superiors kept their distance, unsure of how to handle the situation. Rumors swirled about an internal investigation, though nothing official had been announced yet. At home, Greg's wife, Sarah, noticed a change in him. Normally confident and self-assured, he now seemed distracted and irritable. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed her off. "It's nothing," he muttered, scrolling through his phone. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She dug deeper, searching online until she found the video everyone was talking about. As she watched Greg berate Lisa, her stomach churned. This wasn't the man she married, or so she thought. "Greg, is this really you?" she asked later that evening, showing him the screen. He shrugged defensively. She looked suspicious. "What was I supposed to do?" Sarah shook her head, disappointment etched on her face. Suspicious? Because she was black? Or because she dared to walk down the street without bowing to your authority? Her words hit hard, but Greg refused to admit fault. Instead, he doubled down, insisting he was just doing his job. "You don't understand," he snapped. "People expect us to keep them safe. If I don't act, who will?" Their argument escalated, ending with Sarah retreating to bed in tears. That night, Greg lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Was he truly protecting society, or was he perpetuating harm? He pushed the thoughts aside, telling himself he had nothing to worry about. After all, he hadn't broken any laws. Right? Wrong. Behind the scenes, higher-ups within the police department scrambled to address the fallout. Public pressure mounted daily, forcing officials to take action. An internal investigation was launched, reviewing not only the footage of Greg's encounter with Lisa but also his past conduct. Records revealed a troubling pattern. Several complaints had been filed against him over the years, alleging racial profiling and excessive force. None had resulted in disciplinary action, but now they couldn't be ignored. As investigators combed through evidence, Greg's colleagues distanced themselves further. Once loyal teammates avoided conversations with him, fearing guilt by association. During roll calls, officers whispered behind his back, speculating about his fate. Would he lose his badge? Could criminal charges follow? The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, suffocating Greg with each passing day. Outside the precinct, Lisa emerged as a symbol of resilience. Advocacy groups invited her to speak at rallies and community meetings. At first, she hesitated, doubting whether she deserved such a role, but encouragement from friends and mentors convinced her otherwise. "You're not just fighting for yourself," one activist told her. "You're fighting for every person who's ever been treated unfairly. Your voice matters." Buoyed by these words, Lisa embraced her newfound platform. She traveled to different cities, sharing her story and urging listeners to demand change. Whether addressing crowds of hundreds or sitting in intimate roundtable discussions, She spoke passionately about the need for reform. "We can't wait for justice to happen," she declared at one event. "We have to create it ourselves." Her message resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to join the movement. Young activists organized workshops on combating racism. Parents taught their children about equality and empathy. Teachers incorporated lessons on civil rights into their curriculums. Slowly but surely, Lisa's ordeal sparked a wave of positive action. Yet, amid the progress, challenges persisted. Counter-protests popped up, led by those who defended Greg and dismissed claims of systemic racism. Online trolls continued to harass Lisa, posting vile comments and threats. Despite this, she remained steadfast, drawing strength from her supporters. Every hateful message reminded her why she fought, for a future where no one would endure what she did. Back at the police station, rumors of Greg's impending suspension spread like wildfire. Officers speculated about his fate during breaks, debating whether he deserved punishment or leniency. Meanwhile, Greg clung to denial, refusing to believe his career could end so abruptly. He still showed up for work each day, clinging to the hope that everything would blow over. But deep down, fear gnawed at him. What if it didn't? What if this was the beginning of the end? Unbeknownst to Greg, the investigation neared its conclusion. Investigators compiled their findings into a report, detailing instances of misconduct and bias in his policing history. Witnesses came forward recounting encounters where Greg's behavior mirrored the incident with Lisa. Their testimonies painted a damning picture, one that left little room for doubt. When the verdict finally arrived, it sent shockwaves through the department. Greg was suspended indefinitely pending further review. Worse still, legal proceedings loomed on the horizon, threatening to strip him of more than just his badge. For the first time, Greg faced the possibility of losing everything he worked for. And as he sat alone in his apartment staring blankly at the wall, he realized something terrifying. The world he once controlled had slipped completely out of his grasp. The suspension of Officer Greg marked a turning point, not only in his life but also in the lives of those around him. News of his punishment spread quickly, igniting a mix of reactions across the city. To some, it was a long overdue step toward justice. To others, it raised questions about fairness and due process. But for Greg himself, the weight of reality began to sink in. His world, once defined by authority and control, now felt fragile and uncertain. At first, Greg tried to convince himself that the suspension was temporary, a minor setback he could overcome. He spent hours poring over legal documents, searching for loopholes or precedents that might save his career. Each night he replayed the incident with Lisa in his mind, dissecting every detail. Had he really been wrong? Wasn't it his duty to question suspicious behavior? These thoughts consumed him, keeping him awake as sleep eluded him. But denial couldn't shield him forever. The isolation grew unbearable. At the precinct, colleagues avoided mentioning his name, treating him like a ghost haunting their hallways. Even his closest friends distanced themselves, fearing association with someone labeled a racist. During rare moments when Greg ventured out in public, he noticed people staring at him, some with pity, others with disdain. Strangers whispered behind his back, pointing fingers discreetly. For a man who thrived on respect and order, this sudden invisibility was crushing. At home, things weren't much better. Sarah, his wife, struggled to reconcile the man she married with the officer seen bullying Lisa on camera. Their arguments became more frequent and intense. One evening, after another heated exchange, Sarah packed a suitcase and took their 2 children to her mother's house. "I need time to think," she told him before leaving. Those words echoed in Greg's ears long after the door slammed shut. Alone in the silence of his apartment, he realized how deeply his actions had fractured his family. As weeks turned into months, Greg's life unraveled further. Without his badge, he lost not only his income but also his sense of purpose. Days stretched endlessly, filled with boredom and regret. He applied for jobs outside law enforcement, but employers hesitated to hire someone embroiled in controversy. Rejection letters piled up on his desk, each one chipping away at his confidence. Desperation crept in, leaving him questioning whether he'd ever regain stability. Meanwhile, Lisa continued to inspire change. Her advocacy work gained momentum, drawing attention from influential figures eager to support her cause. Politicians invited her to speak at legislative hearings, while celebrities amplified her message on social media. Every appearance brought new opportunities, yet Lisa remained grounded. Despite the accolades, she never forgot the humiliation she endured that fateful night. It fueled her determination to ensure no one else suffered similarly. One particularly impactful moment came during a national conference on racial justice. Standing before an audience of thousands, Lisa shared her story with raw honesty. She described the fear she felt under Greg's glare, the sting of his words, and the resilience it took to stand firm. When she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Many attendees approached her afterward, thanking her for giving voice to their pain. Among them was a young girl named Maya, whose eyes shone with admiration. "You're my hero," Maya whispered, clutching Lisa's hand tightly. Lisa smiled, kneeling down to meet the child's gaze. "Thank you, sweetheart, but remember, heroes aren't just people who do big things. They're also the ones who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Maya nodded solemnly, promising to follow Lisa's example. Witnessing such moments reminded Lisa why she fought so tirelessly. Change wasn't easy, but every small victory mattered. Back in the spotlight, Lisa collaborated with organizations pushing for police reform. Together, they drafted proposals aimed at improving accountability and reducing bias within law enforcement. Training programs were introduced to educate officers on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques. Community outreach initiatives fostered dialogue between residents and police, bridging gaps that had existed for generations. Though progress was slow, the efforts planted seeds of hope. For Greg, redemption seemed impossible. Yet even in his darkest moments, glimmers of reflection emerged. One day, while flipping through channels, he stumbled upon Lisa's interview. Her calm demeanor and unwavering resolve struck a chord deep within him. As she spoke about forgiveness and moving forward, Greg felt a pang of guilt he couldn't ignore. Could he ever make amends for the harm he caused? Determined to find answers, Greg sought counseling. Initially reluctant, he eventually opened up about his struggles. The therapist challenged him to confront his biases, asking tough questions that forced him to examine his beliefs. Slowly, painfully, Greg began to acknowledge the ways his prejudices shaped his actions. It wasn't easy. Admitting fault meant dismantling years of conditioning, but it was necessary. In an effort to rebuild trust, Greg started volunteering anonymously at local youth centers. He mentored teenagers, sharing lessons learned from his downfall. Though hesitant at first, the kids warmed up to him, appreciating his honesty. One boy, Jamal, confided in Greg about his own run-ins with police. Hearing Jamal's story broke something inside Greg. For the first time, he saw the human impact of systemic racism, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. "I'm sorry," Greg admitted during one session, his voice trembling. "I wish I could take back what I did to people like you." Jamal studied him carefully before responding. "Apologies don't fix everything, but they're a start." Those words stayed with Greg, guiding him as he navigated the path to redemption. Though forgiveness wouldn't come easily, or perhaps at all, he committed to making amends however he could. Small acts of kindness replaced the arrogance that once defined him. He donated to charities supporting marginalized communities and attended workshops on diversity. Each step felt like a tiny victory against the darkness threatening to consume him. Outside Greg's personal journey, the movement sparked by Lisa's courage continued to gain traction. Cities nationwide implemented reforms inspired by her advocacy. Body cameras became mandatory for officers, ensuring transparency in interactions. Independent oversight committees were established to investigate complaints of misconduct. These changes didn't erase decades of inequality overnight, but they represented meaningful strides toward justice. Lisa herself evolved into a beacon of resilience. Awards and honors poured in, recognizing her contributions to society. Yet she remained humble, using her platform to uplift others. She launched a scholarship fund for students passionate about social justice, naming it after her late grandmother, a woman who taught her the value of perseverance. Through these endeavors, Lisa proved that adversity could be transformed into opportunity. As the months passed, the city bore witness to tangible shifts. Trust between law enforcement and communities improved, thanks largely to activists like Lisa, who refused to remain silent. Conversations about race and privilege entered mainstream discourse, challenging individuals to confront uncomfortable truths. Schools revised curriculums to include lessons on civil rights history, fostering empathy among younger generations. Change rippled outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. Yet amidst the progress, scars lingered. Not everyone embraced the reforms enthusiastically. Critics argued that measures like body cameras infringed on privacy, while others dismissed calls for accountability as unnecessary. Counter-movements sprang up, defending traditional policing methods. Tensions flared occasionally, reminding everyone that the road to equality remained fraught with obstacles. Through it all, Lisa stood firm, embodying grace under pressure. When detractors attacked her motives or questioned her integrity, she responded with compassion rather than anger. "We're all learning," she often said. "Let's focus on building bridges instead of walls." Greg, too, found solace in small victories. Though his reputation remained tarnished, he discovered purpose in helping others avoid the mistakes he made. His anonymous involvement in youth programs earned quiet praise from organizers, though few knew his true identity. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating a better future. Years later, the city looked vastly different from the one Greg and Lisa once inhabited. Policing practices reflected greater fairness and accountability, while community relations flourished. Lisa's legacy endured, inspiring countless individuals to advocate for justice. And though Greg faded into obscurity, his journey served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power dynamics at play and the importance of self-reflection. In the end, what began as a single act of cruelty evolved into a movement toward healing. Both Lisa and Greg played pivotal roles in shaping this transformation, albeit in vastly different ways. Their stories intertwined, serving as testaments to humanity's capacity for growth, even amid adversity. The months following Greg's suspension dragged on like a heavy storm cloud, casting a shadow over every aspect of his life. Without the structure of his job or the support of his family, he found himself adrift in a sea of regret and self-doubt. Each morning he woke up to an empty apartment, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. His once pristine uniform hung untouched in the closet, a ghost of the identity he had lost. The man who used to command respect now struggled to recognize himself in the mirror. Desperation pushed Greg to seek employment elsewhere, but doors slammed shut at every turn. Employers hesitated to hire someone embroiled in such controversy, no matter how qualified he might have been. Rejection. Letters piled up on his kitchen table, each one adding to the growing sense of failure gnawing at him. To make ends meet, he took odd jobs, delivering packages, cleaning offices late at night, anything that didn't require references. These menial tasks left him physically exhausted and emotionally drained. He often wondered if this was karma, catching up with him for years of unchecked prejudice. One evening, while sitting alone in his dimly lit living room, Greg decided to revisit the video that had sparked his downfall. He hadn't watched it since the incident, too ashamed to face what he'd done. But something inside him, a mix of curiosity and guilt, compelled him to click play. As the footage unfolded, Greg saw himself through new eyes. He noticed the hostility in his posture, the dismissive tone in his voice, the way Lisa flinched under his gaze. It wasn't just racism, it was cruelty cloaked in authority. For the first time, he truly understood why people were so outraged. That realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Tears streamed down his face as he replayed the video again and again, unable to look away from the pain he had caused. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, clutching his head in despair. That night, sleep eluded him entirely. Instead, he sat staring out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, Lisa was thriving, using her experience to inspire change while he languished in obscurity. The contrast between their paths weighed heavily on him. Determined to confront his flaws, Greg sought professional help. Counseling sessions became a lifeline, offering him a safe space to unpack decades of ingrained biases. At first, he resisted, the therapist's probing questions, defensive about his past actions. "I was just doing my job," he argued during one session. But the counselor challenged him gently, yet firmly. "Was it your job to humiliate someone because of their race? Or did you confuse power with righteousness?" Those words lingered in Greg's mind long after the session ended. Slowly, painfully, he began to peel back the layers of his conditioning. He read books about systemic racism, attended workshops on cultural sensitivity, and listened to personal stories shared by victims of discrimination. Each revelation forced him to reckon with uncomfortable truths. By acknowledging his mistakes, he hoped to find a way forward, not to erase the harm he caused, but to prevent repeating it. Meanwhile, Lisa's influence continued to grow. Her advocacy work gained international recognition, earning invitations to speak at prestigious events around the globe. She addressed crowds in packed auditoriums, sharing her story with raw honesty and unwavering grace. People marveled at her ability to forgive despite the injustice she endured. Yet forgiveness, she explained during one interview, wasn't about excusing wrongdoing. It was about freeing herself from bitterness. "Holding on to anger only hurts you," she said. "Letting go allows you to focus on building a better future." Lisa's message resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to join the fight against racial inequality. Activists organized marches, petitions, and educational campaigns aimed at dismantling systemic barriers. Schools incorporated lessons on civil rights history into their curriculums, teaching students the importance of empathy and allyship. Even corporations pledged to diversify their leadership teams and address workplace discrimination. Change rippled outward, touching lives across generations. But progress wasn't without resistance. Critics dismissed Lisa's efforts as divisive, accusing her of fueling division rather than unity. Counter-protests popped up, led by those who defended traditional policing methods and rejected calls for reform. Online trolls harassed her relentlessly, posting hateful comments and threats designed to intimidate her into silence. Despite this backlash, Lisa remained steadfast, drawing strength from her supporters. Every negative comment reminded her why her work mattered: to create a world where no one felt afraid simply because of the color of their skin. Back in Greg's corner of the world, redemption proved elusive. Though he made strides in understanding his biases, societal forgiveness came slowly, if at all. He knew he couldn't undo the damage he caused, but he hoped to contribute positively in some small way. Volunteering at youth centers provided a glimmer of purpose. Working with teenagers gave him insight into perspectives vastly different from his own. One boy, Jamal, stood out among the group. Quiet and reserved, Jamal rarely spoke unless prompted. When Greg asked about his interests, the boy hesitated before revealing his dream of becoming a lawyer to fight for justice. "That's amazing," Greg replied sincerely. "The world needs more people like you." Jamal studied him warily. "Why? Do you care? You're not exactly known for being fair." Greg winced at the truth in the boy's words. "You're right," he admitted. "I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to learn from them. If I can help even one person avoid the path I took, maybe I'll have done something worthwhile." Over time, Jamal warmed up to Greg, trusting him enough to share his struggles. Their bond deepened when Jamal recounted a recent encounter with police officers who treated him harshly during a routine stop. Hearing the story broke something inside Greg. He realized that his actions weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern perpetuating fear and mistrust within marginalized communities. This epiphany fueled his commitment to making amends. In an effort to rebuild trust, Greg expanded his volunteer work. He joined local initiatives promoting dialogue between law enforcement and residents, facilitating workshops on conflict resolution and mutual understanding. Though his presence initially raised eyebrows, participants gradually appreciated his candor. "It takes courage to admit fault," one attendee remarked during a session. Not everyone would do that. Word of Greg's transformation spread cautiously, earning quiet praise from organizers. Still, he avoided seeking public acknowledgement, knowing his past overshadowed any good he tried to do. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about reclaiming glory. It was about serving others humbly and genuinely. As the years passed, the city underwent significant changes. Reforms implemented in response to Lisa's advocacy reshaped policing practices, prioritizing fairness and transparency. Body cameras became standard equipment, ensuring accountability in officer-civilian interactions. Independent oversight committees investigated complaints of misconduct, holding perpetrators responsible regardless of rank. Community relations improved dramatically, fostering collaboration instead of conflict. These transformations didn't happen overnight. Resistance persisted, with critics arguing that reforms infringed on police autonomy or undermined safety. Tensions occasionally flared, reminding everyone that progress required constant vigilance. Yet overall, the atmosphere shifted toward cooperation and mutual respect. For Lisa, success wasn't measured solely by policy changes. It was reflected in the lives she touched, the young activists inspired by her courage, the families empowered by her example, the strangers who thanked her for giving them hope. Awards and honors poured in, recognizing her contributions to society. Yet she remained humble, using her platform to amplify voices often overlooked. Her scholarship fund supported aspiring leaders committed to social justice, carrying forward the legacy of resilience instilled by her grandmother. Greg, meanwhile, faded into the background, content to remain anonymous. His journey served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of unchecked bias and the potential for growth through reflection. Though forgiveness eluded him publicly, he found solace in small acts of kindness. Helping others navigate challenges similar to his own brought meaning to his otherwise fractured existence. Years later, the city bore little resemblance to its former self. Streets once divided by distrust now buzzed with collaboration. Conversations about race and privilege entered mainstream discourse, challenging individuals to confront uncomfortable truths. Schools nurtured empathy among younger generations, planting seeds of equality destined to bloom in the future. Through it all, Lisa's legacy endured, symbolizing resilience and hope. And though Greg disappeared from public view, his story lingered quietly, a testament to humanity's capacity for change. Both Lisa and Greg played pivotal roles in shaping the city's evolution, albeit in vastly different ways. Their intertwined journeys illustrated the complexity of justice, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring pursuit of a better tomorrow. Years passed, and the city transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The scars of the past remained visible, but they were slowly healing, thanks to the tireless efforts of activists like Lisa and quiet contributors like Greg. The movement, sparked by that fateful night, had grown into a force for lasting change, reshaping not just policies but also hearts and minds. For Lisa, life had taken on a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment. She continued to travel, speaking at conferences, universities, and community events. Her speeches carried the same passion as always, but now there was a sense of maturity, a deeper understanding of the complexities involved in fighting systemic racism. People admired her ability to balance anger with hope, justice with forgiveness. "We can't erase history," she often said during talks, "but we can rewrite its future." Lisa's advocacy work expanded beyond policing reform. She collaborated with organizations addressing housing discrimination, educational inequality, and healthcare disparities. Together they drafted policies aimed at leveling the playing field for marginalized communities. One particularly impactful initiative focused on mentorship programs, pairing young people of color with professionals in various fields. These connections provided guidance, encouragement, and opportunities that many lacked growing up. Her personal life flourished as well. Friends and family rallied around her, offering unwavering support. A close-knit circle of fellow activists became like siblings, sharing both victories and setbacks. In time, Lisa found love again, marrying a kind-hearted teacher named Daniel, who shared her commitment to social justice. Their wedding was intimate yet joyful, attended by those who had walked alongside her through thick and thin. When their first child arrived, a baby girl named Hope, Lisa felt a renewed sense of responsibility. "Every generation deserves a better world than the one before," she told Daniel one evening as they rocked their daughter to sleep. Meanwhile, Greg lived a quieter existence, far removed from the spotlight. He settled into a modest routine, working odd jobs and volunteering whenever possible. Though he rarely spoke about his past, it lingered in the corners of his mind, shaping the way he interacted with others. His experiences taught him humility, patience, and the importance of listening without judgment. These lessons weren't easy to learn, but they stuck with him. One day, while volunteering at a youth center, Greg met a teenager named Marcus, the very same boy who had recorded the viral video years earlier. At first, Marcus didn't recognize him. Greg looked older, wearier, almost unrecognizable from the arrogant officer in the footage. But when Greg introduced himself, Marcus froze, his eyes widening in surprise. "You're that cop?" Marcus stammered, unsure how to react. Greg nodded solemnly. "Yes, I am, and I owe you an apology for everything." The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. For a moment, Marcus considered walking away. After all, this man had once represented everything he despised about the system. But something in Greg's tone, a genuine sincerity, stopped him. Instead, Marcus asked, "Why should I believe you've changed?" Greg hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've spent years trying to understand why I acted the way I did. Not because I wanted to justify it, but because I needed to fix it. I know I'll never undo the harm I caused, but I want to make sure I don't repeat it." Marcus studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Fine. But actions speak louder than words." From that day forward, the two formed an unlikely bond. Marcus became Greg's unofficial accountability partner, challenging him to stay true to his promises. They worked together on projects aimed at bridging gaps between law enforcement and communities of color. Greg's presence initially raised eyebrows among participants, but over time his sincerity won them over. "He's not perfect," Marcus admitted during one workshop. "But he's trying, and sometimes that's enough." As the years went by, the city bore witness to tangible improvements. Policing practices reflected greater transparency and accountability, thanks largely to reforms inspired by Lisa's advocacy. Officers underwent mandatory training on cultural sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and implicit bias. Body cameras ensured interactions were documented, reducing instances of misconduct. Independent oversight committees held authorities accountable, investigating complaints thoroughly and fairly. Community relations improved significantly as well. Residents and police officers began attending joint meetings, fostering dialogue and mutual understanding. Programs like Coffee with a Cop created safe spaces for open conversations, breaking down barriers built over decades of mistrust. Schools partnered with local departments to educate students about careers in law enforcement, encouraging diversity within the ranks. Slowly but surely, collaboration replaced confrontation. Yet challenges persisted. Critics argued that reforms didn't go far enough, pointing out lingering inequalities in sentencing laws, hiring practices, and resource allocation. Counter-movements emerged, defending traditional methods and dismissing calls for change as unnecessary or divisive. Tensions occasionally flared, reminding everyone that progress required constant vigilance. But even amid setbacks, momentum continued to build. Lisa played a pivotal role in sustaining this momentum. Her scholarship fund supported dozens of students passionate about creating change. Recipients pursued careers in law, education, healthcare, and activism, carrying forward her vision of equality. One recipient, a young woman named Amina, credited Lisa with changing her life. "Before meeting her, I thought I'd never escape the cycle of poverty. Amina said during a panel discussion. But Lisa showed me that my voice matters, and so does yours. For Greg, redemption remained a lifelong journey rather than a destination. Though society hadn't fully forgiven him, he found peace in small victories. Helping teenagers navigate challenges similar to his own brought meaning to his otherwise fractured existence. He donated anonymously to charities supporting marginalized communities, attended workshops on diversity, and mentored individuals seeking second chances. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about reclaiming glory. It was about serving others humbly and genuinely. One evening, as Greg walked home from a volunteer session, he noticed a mural painted on the side of a building. It depicted Lisa standing tall, surrounded by symbols of unity and resilience. Beneath her image were the words, "Courage inspires change." Tears welled up in his eyes as he stared at the artwork. This was the legacy of the woman he had wronged, the ripple effect of her courage transforming lives, including his own. Later that night, Greg sat alone in his apartment, reflecting on how far he'd come, and how much further he still had to go. He pulled out a journal and began writing, a habit he'd picked up during counseling sessions. On the page, he poured out his thoughts, fears, and hopes for the future. Writing helped him process emotions too complex for words spoken aloud. As he closed the book, he whispered a silent promise to himself. "I'll keep trying, for as long as it takes." In the end, what started as a single act of cruelty evolved into a movement toward healing. Both Lisa and Greg played pivotal roles in shaping this transformation, albeit in vastly different ways. Their stories intertwined, serving as testaments to humanity's capacity for growth, even amid adversity. Lisa's courage ignited change, proving that resilience could overcome injustice. Greg's humility demonstrated that redemption was possible, even for those who strayed far from the path of righteousness. Decades later, the city stood as a beacon of progress. Streets once divided by fear and mistrust now buzzed with collaboration and empathy. Conversations about race and privilege entered mainstream discourse, challenging individuals to confront uncomfortable truths. Schools nurtured equality among younger generations, planting seeds destined to bloom in the future. Through it all, Lisa's legacy endured, symbolizing resilience, hope, and the enduring pursuit of justice. And though Greg disappeared from public view, his story lingered quietly, a reminder that change begins with acknowledgement, grows through action, and thrives on perseverance. Together, their journeys illustrated the complexity of justice, the power of forgiveness, and the unyielding belief in a better tomorrow. In the heart of the bustling city, where life moved at a relentless pace, humanity proved capable of remarkable transformation, one step, one story, one act of courage at a time.